Okay, good morning and welcome to our MapLink webinar on R&D. We're just waiting a few more attendees coming on board, so I can see we've got some attending already. So thank you very much for coming on this morning. If you can just give it a couple of minutes, we'll get started right away. Say good morning. We also have with us today our panel. I'll introduce them to us a wee bit later on, but you know, if we can just bear with us, and we'll be right with you with regards to our attendance this morning. We're hoping that today, you know, that people will take from this, you know, how using experts in this particular field will help actually increase, you know, the client awareness of R&D and add value to your accountancy practice. So I think what we'll do this morning is we've got a few more attending on there. So I think what we'll do is we'll just get started right away. And as I say, welcome. I'd like to just introduce myself to you this morning. My name is Donald Patterson. I'm the Managing Director of MapLink UK. And just to let you know briefly who we are, MapLink is one of several companies within the group. We have Money Advice Partnership. Money Advice Partnership is a regulated IFA firm. We also have Mortgage Advice Partnership, which obviously says what it does in the tin. It's mortgage and protection. We also have Map Enrollment Solutions, and Map Enrollment Solutions was a company that we set up to deal with the government's workplace pension when it became compulsory, and we've been dealing with many companies over the last few years, helping them bed in workplace pensions for their companies. So that got us involved with lots of smaller companies, SMEs, where we were engaged with them to bring workplace pensions into place. Obviously, through our other companies, especially the wealth management company, we were already dealing with directors and companies and trying to add value to them. Now, MapLink really brings everything together, and from there we got involved with adding additional products and services into the mix. And you know, we're delighted we hooked up with a couple of experts in this market to help us provide these services, and I'm delighted to welcome along this morning Keith Trubshaw and Bob Boardman. Good morning, guys, and thank you for joining us.
I've changed my name to Bob Boardman on here, but there you
go. Both Bob and Keith have between them over 15 years experience purely in R&D. That's all they've been doing for that period. It sounds as if they haven't been doing that much, but actually they've been exceedingly busy during that 15-year period. So we've been working hand in hand with them now for the last 2 to 3 years, and I must admit the service has been excellent, and certainly our clients have benefited greatly from their expertise. So thank you for attending this morning. What I really wanted to do today was very briefly in the half hour that we have is to explain the who, what, whys and whens really of R&D, and how, you know, using a company like ourselves can enhance that client experience. And so very simply, the first thing I think we have to dispel is some of the myths that are out there. Many companies and clients we go to see, including some accountants as well, is that some people feel that R&D only applies to men in white coats. In other words, the big pharmaceutical companies, etc. Well, that quite clearly, with our experience, is just not the case. R&D project has to be successful. Well, I think, you know, it's research and development, and if we got 100% success rate on everything that we did, then the world would be a different place, and we certainly wouldn't be in the COVID scenario we have at the moment. So many, you know, research and development projects do not succeed, but can still be a very costly affair for companies. So the project doesn't have to have succeeded. R&D claims wouldn't be worth doing. Well, you know, that really, we have had many companies where they've been surprised at what they claim for. Some of them don't think they've spent that much on development, but once they realise the expenditure that can be included into a claim, they then realise, you know, that this is something worth doing. Some think that it will result in a tax investigation. Well, certainly, you know, the feedback with Bob and Keith is that in all the claims that they've done, which are excessive, not one has resulted in a tax investigation. And I think, you know, again, another reason why using, you know, a third-party company like ourselves involved in R&D claims is that the thoroughness that has gone into the investigation with a company, the fact finding, the report writing, all adds, you know, credence to any claim that's submitted to HMRC. So a lot of people think it doesn't apply to small, medium enterprises. Well, again, you know, we can show that, you know, from a few £1,000s claim right through to tens of thousands, even a few £100,000, it is available to all SME companies regardless of the spend. So eligibility, many companies then ask, well, you know, how would I know if I was eligible? And there are certainly criteria and there's information available from HMRC and certainly from, you know, the companies that we see that are kind of predominantly in the claim arena are obviously software companies, automation, development of new materials, etc., innovation formulas, product development, etc. Now, whether it's success or failure, they go hand in hand. But I'd like to bring in, you know, Keith, what's your kind of thoughts on eligibility when you see clients? How do they feel when you're talking to them? Do they expect to be eligible, or what's your findings?
Well, by the time we see them, often they've been convinced at least to put their toe in the water to see if they are eligible. But what we see is, and I'm sure Bob will agree with me on this, we see a lot of raised eyebrows saying, "Can we claim for that? We never knew," you know. Yeah. And it's this thing whereby people are in this state of ignorance, and I don't mean that in an insulting way, whereby that what they've been doing year on year on year on year, what to them is their everyday business. Actually, part of that has always been R&D, has always been, you know, and whether they're in the software industry or automation industry, if they are embracing technology, however tangentially, if they're embracing technology to improve their business or to improve a product, then the chances are there is an R&D claim to be had.
Yeah, no, it's super. You know, I appreciate that. Thank you. How would they know if they were eligible? Well, I mean, in most situations, what we really say to companies is if there's anything that you have purchased or that activities you're doing that means it's going to be bespoke, you're having to adapt things, you're researching, you know, do you design and make products? Well, that's an obvious one. Do you seek to improve processes, services, materials, or devices? You know, there's a few of the smaller claims we've done where companies have, for example, bought in an off-the-shelf CRM system, but then have to adapt it and spend money for it, you know, to make it fit. And that's something where, yes, it's maybe not an ongoing process they'll do, but have a one-off spend. Even on a small basis, that can be quite lucrative for the company. Do they make prototypes or perform testing? And many a company from tool making to engineering would fall into that category. Do they develop software or IT solutions? So again, bespoke, adapting, you know, manufacturing. Have you invested in, you know, field projects or developed production? Yes, that have never launched. There's many a company have set off, and I think that's more prevalent today. You know, when we look around the world we're living in just now, every one of us in business is having to make, you know, changes, and some radical. Other companies are totally transforming in the way they go about interacting with their customers, and all of that you know, many people will be now getting involved in research and development that were maybe never in it before. So there's more and more people, and you know, are they aware of this? You know, this is the thing. So Bob, what's your views on the eligibility of clients?
I think you're absolutely spot on. You just touched on something that is so relevant. There'll be a lot of companies now who will make that jump to go online as a retailer. They'll have shied away from it for years and now decided that the only way that we can keep ourselves afloat or keep the sales coming is we need to get online and do retail.
Yeah. They
may well purchase a system that they think will work. The reality is, for a lot of those people, it might have 60% functionality. They'll then spend the next 3 or 4 months trying to get the staff to learn how to use it, trying to get it to work with couriers, payment systems, etc., etc. We've dealt with the retail sector for quite a while on this, and we've got one client who's been with us for 3 years, and he had to pay for an expert to come and work with him because he just simply didn't have the skill set to make the systems work. And there'll be a lot of people who this year, because of what's going on, will have to adapt their business. They'll see it as firefighting. It's actually development. They just won't see it. They'll be too busy trying to keep the business online. But all that time, all that money they spend when they basically go for a system and it doesn't work, and they don't build one from scratch, that's when the claims start to mount up. But they won't necessarily see that as development. They're too engrossed in the business.
Well, I'll maybe backtrack, and one of the things is because the fear that many people have had is that it will, you know, invoke an investigation by HMRC into their business. Can you maybe discuss that fear that maybe some companies have at the moment?
Yeah, certainly. For us, we've been doing this for a long time, Donald, and the key thing is the revenue, the money is there to be given away. And in some of the early days, we had conversations with them and they said, so long as it's legitimate and it's asked for in the correct manner, we are more than happy to pay for it. But if somebody thinks they're going to get a tax investigation, one of the key things where they might be looked at is if they've got a turnover of X amount of pounds, not been profitable for 2 or 3 years, and they suddenly stick in a claim for £300,000. It's clearly going to raise an eyebrow. But the way that we work the system is very, very simple. We will go and see the client. If myself and Keith are happy that it's a genuine claim, then it proceeds. If we're not, it doesn't go anywhere. We spend quite a lot of time with the client and we take some detailed notes. So once we do the report, and I think that's the key, the report backs up the claim. We basically explain why it's R&D and why the company are eligible to claim for it. And that for me is the big difference, and I think it's why we've never had an issue, because we don't put a random figure in. It's calculated properly with a full report as backup to say this is why it's research and development. That's what we do.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. You know, another thing is that companies have said to us is, well, why bother? You know, if there's not a lot to be gained. Well, there is, and you know, I think the more they would look at doing this report and delving into it and spending the time looking at what they do on a day-to-day basis, quite a lot of them are surprised just to learn that they do qualify for this valuable source of you know, funding. Really, it's a great way, especially now with companies looking to maybe, you know, pay off the bounce back loans or anything that, you know, they've had to do. They might just be eligible for an R&D claim that could just, you know, be the thing that helps them out from a cash flow perspective at this moment. You know, improve. There's always room for improvement. So many new projects, as we've just said. You know, many companies go on from project to project. So that's something that we would deal with on a year-by-year basis. So once they're used to making a claim, then there's nothing to stop us looking at that on an annual basis for them, looking at the projects of the previous year and working with it. So that's fantastic. As I say, there's going to be many companies now involved in R&D that weren't before, simply because of their changing circumstances as we all are having to deal with. The cash in hand, well, the average, really R&D credit for the SME, for the small companies is based around about 50,000. And I know that's, it's a broad figure, but we certainly, our experience of the smaller companies is that 50k is not an unreasonable amount to claim. We have obviously, and can give examples shortly of claims that are far in excess of that. But that for a small medium company would be pretty standard. Is that your experience as well, guys?
Yeah, in terms of how much money, obviously people think, oh, we turn over a lot, therefore we can claim a lot. The turnover is almost irrelevant in this. It's where the spending sits. It's how much money they've spent, and it might be a huge percentage of the turnover that they've spent on R&D, maybe a tiny percentage. But 50,000 is pretty typical when we first met somebody, and then a few weeks later there's 50,000 quid that's come through the system. It takes about 4 weeks once it gets into the hands of the revenue. And if I can just touch on the tax investigation thing that you mentioned, if a company clearly does R&D and has never claimed, that raises the question, why haven't they claimed? Have they got something to hide? So there's this kind of, if you like, double bluff thing that happens. But if, in the words of a tax inspector when I had a conversation with one some while ago, once they have that report in their hands, then if they pay it, and we've no experience that says they never do, because they always do, if they pay it, they cannot ask us, or they cannot ask the client for the money back, because it is the taxman's decision to pay it. Therefore, or not therefore, but what we've done is we've simply made a request to the taxman or the HMRC for the money. There's no fraud involved, there's nothing involved there, except for the fact that as long as we've told the truth in the report, then it is on the taxman's own head whether they pay it or not. There is no, and that's their words, not mine. They once it's paid, they cannot come back and ask for the money back because of the fact that the report has justified it, if that helps.
You're asking them to approve that report. You're just submitting a report with a request.
Yeah, all we're looking for is a tick on the report. Once they've ticked it and said, yeah, good to go, that's fine. Nothing to worry about.
Super. Okay. So if we look at, the R&D from the HMRC perspective, it's something that not all companies, especially SMEs, are aware exists. We know of, quite a few accountants who, yes, have been involved in it, but put in a kind of basic amount. There hasn't been the full reporting done. This is where, as I say, involving the likes of ourselves, we can go in and do a more thorough investigation within the actual company and provide this report. And on some occasions, we have been able to go in where there's been R&D claims in the past, but actually gone and backtracked and managed to get a further claim for that year. HMRC itself, this is the front of their brochure. They do have a brochure marketing R&D, and as you can see, it really focuses on some of the main industries. But that is not compulsory. That is not, restricted to just these particular industries. So let's have a little quick look at some of the actual ones we've been involved in. So, from a food production side, we looked at, there was heat testing, flavouring, etc. And as you can see there, that resulted in, again, a reasonable claim for that company. Development of CRM systems, yeah, very much into something that's created from the start rather than off the shelf. It's all about bespoke and development and adapting processes. Again, very simply, that's a very easy, quick win. And another one at the bottom there was, continued development of new and current product range. Well, it was the safety gel sachets, for water absorbing. And again, it's just adapting products, and again, that takes time. And that's where the majority of claim will come from. It's not necessarily on the material all the time. A lot of it comes down to the man hours put in to development and research, and that is generally what's happening. Is that what you would say, guys, as well, that they kind of atypical of the kind of stereotype claims that you maybe deal with?
Yeah, it is. One of the key things for us is for most limited companies, depending on the sector, the answer very often is yes. But what you'll find when we one of the reasons that we do as well that we do for the clients is because we spend quite a bit of time with them. And just a simple case of a concrete company may well be approached by an existing client or a brand new client to simply say, can you do this for us? We need it to set within a day. It needs to be operational within a day. I'm thinking in mind it might be somewhere like an airport, so they're doing running repairs, and that has got to work. The director will say, yeah, absolutely, we can do that. 3 months later, you might still be scratching their head, because whilst they've got the experience, something that they thought would be really simplistic to do, in reality, when they get into the bones of it, can just be a nightmare.
Yeah.
So a lot of people will have a product or a service, but because of the very nature of the beast, they're continually improving it. They have to.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's where we find a lot of the development and a lot of the costs.
Thanks, Bob. Some of the other ones where, and I think this highlights the myths we were talking about earlier, where they didn't believe, you know, they had a claim or it was too small, etc. These are actual cases that we've been dealing with, and one was from a taxi company. Not going to go into the detail of everyone here, obviously, but it was almost like Uber. They created a CPS kind of, or a GPS, I should say, CRM system, and that got them back 73,000. A blacksmith we were dealing with, he made bespoke banisters, so for shopping centres, larger houses, they would go in and design, you know, banisters and railings, etc. Again, a lot of research and development went in and creating, you know, tooling up to create, you know, the product. So again, client is now, you know, £60,000 better off. For making, and he was definitely one who said, no, we don't do any R&D, because again, he had in his head that it was all test tubes and white coats. The retailer, IT, telecommunication, again, huge at the moment, because many people are having to go online, are having to create, as the panel said earlier, new systems and methods of dealing with their clients. So that one is definitely a growth market in the R&D claims. Concrete and fabrication, again, a company who basically they were in the farming community and designed new buyers and methods of pouring concrete in wet conditions, etc. So again, it was product development, and that now is in its 3rd year of claims for us. So that company goes on to make claim after claim every year, which is great. Scaffolding specialist, again, someone who designs scaffolding for bespoke buildings, where obviously they have to almost design and manufacture some product to cope with different types of scaffolding for buildings nowadays as well. So just some typical examples of people who, in our experience, didn't think that they had an R&D claim. And if you just look at what we've managed to achieve for them, so we're pushing in open doors when we go back to these companies. They are delighted. And I think what this highlights is the whole thing about dispelling myths and using experts to try and bring out more from these companies. What I would say to the accountants that are with us today on this webinar is that, none of us would have the time to go out and spend the amount of time that Bob and Keith do with a company and speak to and fact find with the owner and kind of talk through all the projects, what they've been involved with that year, and dig a bit deeper to the point where they can provide that report. we would work very much with you, you know, and make sure that, you know, everything is fed back to you. We work with you to make sure that, you know, there's an understanding of the amount of claim, and we would do that on an annual basis. The feedback from clients, you know, the feel-good factor for the fact that their accountant has referred them to this, you know, opportunity, and on that basis have managed to get them this amount of money back. Certainly they never have any grumbles about the accountancy fee after you've managed to achieve this amount of cash back for them. So that's great news. Guys, can you maybe just talk a wee bit more about, you know, the report itself, how that works, and, you know, the time involved in getting that together?
You want to go with that, Bob?
I can't do it yet.
I thought I'd back that one over to you.
Okay.
Keith does most of the report writing, but the nice thing is, the way that we do it, we'll go and see a client initially, just to explore what they have and haven't done. And just the classic thing, I'll sit down with the client and say, okay, in the last couple of years, are there any projects that you've done that you wish you hadn't done? Because when we do the report, the nice thing is the revenue don't want to see a report the size of a phone book. They want something nice and concise, with 2 or 3 examples for each tax year. But this is typically what the client does. So we'll highlight 2 or 3 typical single cases that they've had, little projects that they've dealt with. It may well be that they've been asked to produce a brand new product. So obviously that's a great place to start. With a lot of companies though, that product development may well take place over 2 or 3 years. So in other words, they may well be on Mark 4 or 5. So sometimes we'll put in just individual projects with a distinct start and finish date. But certainly when we're talking to manufacturing companies, very often they'll have a product that they've been using for 5 or 6 years, and it changes on an annual basis. So it's the fact that we spend time with people that we get as much detail as we do. We'll ask for a walk around the premises, and that just throws up some great questions, because we can ask, who's that person over there? What do they do? Why is that machine covered up? What's the problem? Well, we bought it from Italy. We were assured it would do this, it would sit into our process, we could integrate it, and it would save time. And 6 months later, it's in the corner covered up. What they don't realise is that all that time of trying to get it to work and integrated or adapted into their system is classic R&D. Failure is a key thing that we look for. And you won't get an MD or an FD or an engineer admitting failure over the phone or sending them emails. You will do when you get face to face with them, because we engage with them. So once we've done that and formulated the report, we then get all the costings. That's all put together. It's then submitted to HMRC. They typically, for HMRC, it takes, in theory, up to 4 weeks. Depending on where they're at, it can sometimes take a little bit longer. But once it's been submitted to them, so long as it goes in before the year end, it means we can go back 2 full years. So classically, if somebody has a year end of September, if we can get that claim in before the end of September, we've got those 2 full clear years, the close years, to submit. So it's very, very important from that point of view. Once it's in and submitted, we get confirmation it's in, and we just wait for the money to turn up. Simple as that.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Bob. And I think you know, this is the main crux of our webinar this morning, is for us to engage with companies and spend that time and go through the process. And once that process is done and that claim is submitted, your experience at the moment with R&D and HMRC, how long is it taking to see the money come through, guys?
Scotland has been rather quicker than England of late. Mm-hmm. We've seen them come through in 3 weeks in Scotland lately, right. 4 weeks. But don't shoot us if it's 12 weeks, because what's happened since COVID, particularly because the revenue are deploying different people to different places. It depends which office it ends up as and what their workload is. So we've seen some that have gone pretty slow. 12 weeks isn't unusual, although we can chase it after it's more than 4 weeks overdue. But in the main, Scotland has been pretty good, and it has been around 4 weeks, maybe 3 weeks on occasion. But okay, it can take longer, the revenue, you know, They are their own masters as far as that's concerned.
Yeah,
But
and
once
down
it's
south,
in, it's in.
what's your experience of down south as well then, Keith?
Down south, 4 weeks isn't unusual. Probably nearer 5 weeks.
Yeah.
There are some exceptional ones that might be down to 3, but some others are taking sort of 10 weeks. You know,
Okay. Well,
it depends upon whose desk it falls on and how busy they are.
yeah, no, as always, and you know, I think as more and more companies are maybe trying to find ways of raising capital, you know, I'm sure R&D claims will get busier, and you know, we would certainly encourage that. The various stages we have on screen there would take us through, you know, initial calls right through to site visit, and you know, that's where once we get to that and get the report in, it's fairly quick for the companies. So you know, that's really where we are today. I'd like to really thank you for your time this morning, and hopefully, you know, from there you realise the kind of advantages of engaging with people like ourselves that can go in and spend the time with your clients and try and dig around a bit deeper to see if there's a claim, and you'll hopefully benefit from that. So I appreciate your time. That's our contact details there, and if there are any questions, you know, please, you have the details. Email me through, and we'll hook up. We'll certainly even try and arrange one-to-one with the panel for you. But we'd be delighted to take this a wee bit further and see if we could help you and your clients bring this benefit to them. Okay.